Okay, good evening. Thank you very much for coming to join us today. And I hope you guys are having a great time already. The show floor has a ton of energy, lots of great vendors here, lots of great learnings. I love conferences, especially these when we're talking about technical things. It's such an opportunity to learn. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, or first I should probably introduce myself. My name is Chris McHenry. I lead product at Aviatrix. We are a longtime partner with AWS. Have been working with them for almost 10 years, innovating in the networking and network security space, and really making sure that you can deploy your applications in the cloud and do it without making trade-offs between speed, agility, and security. Now today we're going to be talking about a specific situation which I see a lot of organizations struggling with in the cloud, and that is how do you apply perimeter security controls to application environments that have been deployed in a very cloud-native way. We're going to talk about a concept called island VPCs. These are VPCs that might be developer playgrounds, but are also oftentimes places where production applications live because they were developed to be cloud first. They're accessing third-party APIs. They're using amazing services like Bedrock and DynamoDB and all of the things that AWS gives us. So to get started with this story, we're going to take a look at one of our favorite people, the developer. And we're going to talk about their first journey into the cloud, because I think this was really the aha moment that really allowed AWS to thrive. So they start out and they say, hey, I need to deploy a VM, I need to deploy an application, and they go to the console or they go to their infrastructure as code platform, click, 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 use some of the defaults. We're deploying a VM, we're deploying a container, and immediately I get access to the internet and to all of these amazing services. Wow, networking is easy. It's amazing, right? Now, underneath the covers, there are actually a lot of really interesting things that happen here. Maybe you're using the default Terraform modules. Maybe you're using a CloudFormation template. Maybe you're getting a landing zone from the people who are providing those things for you. But you're getting a set of IP addresses. And, the default range is 10.0.0/16, right? For those people who are used to networking, that is a very big address space. You deploy another VPC, and all of a sudden it's overlapping, and now all of a sudden networking becomes complicated. You might have deployed a NAT gateway. NAT gateways aren't free, but they are the magic that allows you to access the internet, and that's really important. You get route tables automatically programmed, and you have a security group that allows all default outbound access. Now, this is really great because it makes accessing those services incredibly easy, but the InfoSec team isn't super happy about this, right? Now, I think we should take a look at why that's the case, actually, because this is a really, really, really important part of a traditional network. This is what we call the perimeter. And a lot of people think, OK, the perimeter, this is primarily how do I stop people from getting into the network? But the practicality is that the perimeter is anything that goes in or leaves your organization. So there's this concept in cybersecurity that we call the kill chain. This is actually the unified kill chain model. And it walks through the different phases that an attacker goes through as they're trying to exploit your network. One of the first set of phases is that time when they're trying to get in. The second set of that phases is the time when they're moving through your network. Now, island VPCs are really interesting because if they're not connected to the rest of your network, lateral movement is really, really challenging. So it may actually be a good architectural decision. And then the last step is what do they do with this? How do they steal your data? How do they exfiltrate it? Now, a lot of people think that outbound network security is primarily focused on this last phase, but that's actually not true. Right? What a cybersecurity team really wants to do is they want to stop the breach before it starts. So when we look at this actual first phase, which is how does the attacker get into the network, how do they establish persistence, there are multiple parts of this phase that you can actually stop by having good outbound internet security. And we just talked about how the default posture in the cloud is allowing all outbound internet traffic. This is a really critical control point. Now, I think the reason this became the case was because it's easy. It's easy to use those services, but this has become more and more popular of a topic. In fact, I looked up the sessions at reInvent, and I think there's 3 or 4 sessions this week on egress network security controls. So how can we solve this problem? Now, it's first interesting to look at why this is a challenge in the first place, and that's primarily because the perimeter in the cloud is not nearly as well defined as it was on premises. When you think about the controls that you had on-prem, the first thing that you probably plugged into the internet was a firewall, right? I have a physical cable that tells me where my perimeter is. I have 4 walls in a data center. I have a bunch of physical branches that I can protect, right? The perimeter in the cloud is logical. It's configuration oriented. And we have to think about how do we get control of that. Another challenge here is that the architectural models to solve this have primarily been to lift and shift the existing on-premises architecture into the cloud. What was historically horizontally distributed, right? If you think about cloud architectures, application architecture, I want to refactor them. I want to re-architect them. I want to horizontally scale them. And then we're going to go take network security, and we're going to centralize it. And we're going to create large failure domains. And we're going to figure out how can we take that beautiful horizontally scalable architecture and plumb it into a centralized architecture. This is lifting and shifting the network security architecture into the cloud. There has to be a better way. Now let's talk about one more challenge that makes this really unique, and that is this concept of VPCs that might not otherwise need to be connected to the corporate network, right? Or might have scenarios where they have been deployed in advance and are very difficult to connect to the corporate network. Maybe you are a Kubernetes shop, which most of you probably are, and you're deploying EKS, which is an amazing service, but you're starting to run out of IP addressing space, and now you're forced to connect it to the network and have something that's routable in order to overcome these challenges. Island VPCs are really interesting. Isolating applications is actually a good thing, but they become incredibly challenging when I want to implement network security controls. So how can we solve for this? We talked a little bit about Kubernetes. I probably should have looked at my next slide. This is a really interesting one. So this is one of the places where Aviatrix has a really, really unique solution. We've re-architected, we've refactored the concept of network security for the public cloud. Tightly integrated with the AWS APIs, tightly integrated with infrastructure as code, so that we can deliver a developer-centric experience while also making the security teams happy. And one of the things that we announced earlier this week, actually a couple weeks ago at KubeCon, was a deep integration with EKS to allow organizations to dynamically apply security policy and also solve some of the interesting EKS challenges like IP overlap. I've talked to multiple customers who are looking at deploying IPv6 just so that they can get around running out of IP address space with Kubernetes. I just had a conversation with a customer an hour ago talking about IPAM for Kubernetes. We can overcome all of those challenges without giving up visibility, without giving up granular controls. Another concept we'll talk about is making sure that this integrates deeply into the developer workflow so that you can use things like intent-based policies to build firewall access controls. So I can do things like saying, hey, I want to allow this namespace in my shared cluster to access these third-party services. And even if those pods change or the application gets redeployed or the IP address is resolved differently, that policy automatically follows it without agents. Very important. One of the big announcements at AWS this week was EKS Auto Mode. We can solve this even in EKS Auto Mode. Another huge thing is how do we accelerate the process to a better security posture? Discovering threats is one thing from a security perspective, but it's a lot like trying to find a needle in a haystack. We've seen a huge industry transition towards zero trust, and zero trust is really powerful. But it's really challenging oftentimes because you don't know what your applications are doing. You don't necessarily know what services they need to connect to. This is an amazing opportunity to enhance this workflow with GenAI, and we just submitted a provisional patent that allows you to accelerate your journey and customize policy recommendations for your application environments, leveraging Amazon Bedrock. We'll talk about a little bit about where this shows up in our demo. Also, being able to understand what your risk is, and not just understand it, but take action against it, so that I can actively improve my security posture versus forwarding a form to a set of developers that says, hey, patch these systems, waiting for their responses. So, interesting to talk about, much more interesting to see in practice. About a month ago, we announced our Aviatrix PaaS offering. It's a full as-a-service offering for the entire suite of Aviatrix capabilities, including our cloud perimeter security and distributed cloud firewall features. So let's take a look at how quickly we can go from nothing to zero trust security in an AWS environment. So this is Aviatrix PaaS. We're going to log in very quickly. In fact, today, we just started onboarding customers in limited GA. If you are interested in using this, head to our booth, 144, I think it is, right over there, giant orange sign. So anyways, we log in. The first thing that we've done, the only thing I've done before this is we've onboarded our AWS accounts with typical IAM privileges. And you can see we're automatically discovering your environment and starting to make an assessment about where we think you could improve your security posture. You can see we've got 4 VPCs here across multiple regions and multiple accounts. And we have a process to take you from an unprotected state to a fully protected state. You start out with an unprotected VPC. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to onboard that VPC. Now, what's really cool here is you don't need to know anything about networking. And you can look and see here, I actually have 2 VPCs that we're going to protect that have the exact same IP addresses. How do we do this? We need to have separate policies. It's different applications. Aviatrix doesn't care. It allows us to secure island VPCs. So we onboard that VPC. Again, very little you have to know about networking to do this. Tightly integrated with the APIs. And we move it from unprotected to onboarded to monitored. Now, why is monitored important? It's important because we need to be able to understand what the applications are doing if we're going to take this VPC into a zero trust posture. But before we even get there, we start to get deeper visibility into the services that these applications are using just by onboarding the VPC. So you can start to see, hey, here are all the third-party services that are connecting out of my VPC. Here are all the dependencies that my applications have. And there's actually some really interesting benefits already from a troubleshooting perspective, from a cost monitoring perspective. I can start to see what's contributing to my egress costs. Now, once we've monitored for a period of time, we get a good baseline. You can see all of the different services that are being consumed. But I don't necessarily know what these mean. I'm a security administrator. I'm not the developer or the owner of the application. We can very quickly, with Gen AI, make recommendations that are customized for your environment. We know that this VPC is a non-prod VPC. We know it's consuming these particular applications. We can give you very detailed insight into what each of the different domains are, how they're being used, whether they're normal, whether they're abnormal, so that you as a security team can make a quick determination. And rather than just forwarding a spreadsheet, which you can do, you can download this, send it to your developer, save it looks OK. Rather than them having to go review 200 different domains, you can say, hey, just give me those top 5, and let me know if those are interesting to you. We want to make a determination on those. Now, from there, we can directly go across our entire cloud environment from a monitored mode into a fully protected mode. Aviatrix Distributed Cloud Firewall will provision and enforce policy on that VPC so that if an attacker now comes in and wants to establish command and control or wants to download malware, their traffic and their attempted connections are automatically going to be denied. Not only can we make an impact here, but you get immediate real-time feedback as your security posture is being enforced. If you have a new VPC that comes online and doesn't have those protections, you'll see how that impacts your security score. Now again, 2 VPCs, exact same IP addresses. This is really important. This could be 2 separate Kubernetes clusters. It could be 2 separate life cycles of the application. You want to have a complete clone of your other environment. Doesn't matter to us. You still get centralized visibility and control. That's because we're enforcing this policy not based on IP addresses like every single other firewall vendor, but we're enforcing it based on attributes, the name of the VPC, the region that it's in, the account that it's a part of, and the policy is intelligent enough to be applied in the appropriate places. You'll also have centralized visibility for auditing purposes into the exact policies, the exact URLs, the exact domains that are being enforced, and you can go directly from there to your application team. So we went through that entire process, and as a result of this, you'll see that just those domains that we didn't include in the policy are now no longer functioning, but everything else in the environment is working as expected. So that takes us from 0 security to 0 trust in under 4 minutes. So what does that mean, right? That means cloud network security teams and the developer teams now get to be really good friends. If you're interested in this, we've got a booth, 144, I think I said, 144, awesome, booth 144, come visit us. Aviatrix PaaS, officially in limited GA. We're onboarding customers now, fully procurable from the marketplace, fully designed for infrastructure as code, and we can help solve and drastically improve your cloud network security posture. Thank you very much.